Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Life Warrior podcast. This is episode 4. And I kind of gave a prelude before about who the guest was going to be tonight. And it is my friend Amanda Sadler from Kentucky. She just told me she lived like 2,000 yards from Fort Knox or something. Is that about right? Uh, so, but Amanda and I met on TikTok, and she just came into my live, and she kind of jumped in, and we've just it's kind of taken off from there. Amanda had a story, and that's really how it started, and how she came on, and she was just interjecting a lot of things, and was really good at what she was doing. As a matter of fact, she's done some really cool stuff on my lives. The young man that was on our live that night, that was homeless and living on his own and just kind of was out there. I don't know how you did it, but you found him somehow in the park that he was in through family, or I don't remember how you did it, but and offered to get him help, which he refused, right? And I think he refused it.
He did refuse, and through family, we were able to kind of find the park he was at and kind of put 2 and 2 together that, hey, this person's this is what he looks like. And they were able to find him.
Yeah. That was kind of the first time where I was like, all right, this lady's different. This lady's not average, and it's kind of how my wife is. Once she decides, it's like, let the dog loose, and that's what she does. She does her thing. Y'all are similar in that, and so after that, it was like, she comes on all the time, and we finally are now here for her to tell her story of how she got started. Amanda is a counselor, and so her story is, it's going to be amazing, and not because of all the bad things, but because of where she is now. That is the really crazy important part about all this Life Warrior stuff. I always say, right, the story has just made you who you are. It's the why and the good things you've done to get yourself out of whatever situation you're in and helping other people. So that's a major part of her story that we're going to get to. But first, I'm going to let Amanda kind of explain to you where her story started. I'll let her, we talked about this before. You start where you need to start, where you think the most important part of your life, where your story is. Start there, and just kind of let everybody know what you're about, and where you came from, and we'll work the rest of it out. That sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, we'll go on.
So I guess where to start my story would actually be to start my story when I divorced from my kids, my 3 oldest kids, their biological dad. It was a horrible, horrible divorce, and I was young. We went through that young, dumb phase. I had my first child when I was a senior in high school. I got pregnant at 17. I was the worst mother on the face of the earth. That's what people thought. I chose to keep my kid and raise him. He's 22 today.
Awesome.
But after my divorce, I felt like, because I had went from being in a relationship from the time I was in, high school, after my divorce, I didn't know how to be by myself. So, I thought, okay, I'm going to find somebody else. So I thought I met the most perfect person on the face of the earth. This person gave me the world, or so I thought.
Right.
So, my family absolutely loved him. Things were going great. Until one night, I said one wrong word. And that one wrong word led to multiple nights of being thrown into chairs, thrown into walls. And it kept going. I lived my life for 5 years in that form of abuse. And every day as a woman, and I can say this as I know different now and in relation to other people, every woman thinks it's going to get better, just as I did. It's going to get better. He's sorry the next day. I'm sorry I did that. Don't tell nobody. I'll never do it again.
Yeah.
And every day got worse. It was a good day to know that, hopefully today is going to be that day that it's normal.
Yeah.
I mean, it got to where, I would go through broken ribs, wear sweatshirts in the summertime. And my family knew what was going on, but I refused help. It's going to get better. And that's what I kept telling myself. It's going to get better. And that was my heart, that was my hardest part is, I had mentally prepared myself every day to live like that.
Wow.
And one day I remember walking, we had a fire pit, we had people over. After that, I was walking from the building to our house. And that was the very last thing I remembered. Leading up to this, it was nothing, like I said, nothing for me to, have broken ribs on a pretty regular basis. Or just, I would be sitting down watching TV, and the next minute the only way to say it is I was getting hell beat out of me.
Man, so you were, gosh, for 5 straight years, every day, I say like people have life warrior decisions that they make. So literally every day, every minute for 5 straight years, you were having to make this ridiculous life warrior decision of living that life, man. Wow.
Now, it was almost, I wouldn't say that I became an alcoholic at the same time, but there again, I would know when he would go to work, I would know what time he was going to get off, and I would drink a few beers before he got home. And for me at the time, I would tell myself, these are going to help me get through, because it would give me a numb feeling. It wouldn't hurt as bad. And I was always scared that if I let somebody help me, that it was gonna get worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it did. There would become times that he would say, "Hey, let's go to the bar and hang out with our friends," but you can't tell them anything. Oh, you just, you fell outside with the horses, or, there was always a story that came up that's what I had to tell. And it was hard. We would go out with those friends. Those friends thought that we had the most perfect relationship there ever was.
Yeah.
And one night was the biggest eye opener for me. Like I said, I was back to where I was walking from the fire pit, the garage fire pit, to the house.
Yeah.
And it was the very last thing I remembered. So the next morning, I woke up and I'm like, something doesn't feel right. And I started, I sat up and I started feeling the back of my head, and I had blood running down the back of my head. My phone was turned off. I couldn't call anybody except for him, because he had control of my phone. He was that very controlling person. So I called him and I said, "What happened? What's wrong with me?" And he said, "I never thought you would wake up."
Wow. So he was hoping that you would. Was that his hope? Or that's what he was trying to do?
Honestly, the way I look at it today is he tried to kill me. He didn't want me to wake up.
Yeah.
Because when you get that voice saying, "I didn't think you would wake up."
Yeah.
At that point, I was petrified. I was freaked out. I didn't know what to do. So About 30 minutes into the conversation, he told me that I could call my mom. So I called my mom, but I had to come back. And so I called my mom and she said, well, I'm going to come get you. And I was like, I don't know what to do. So I explained to him that, hey, my mom says she'll come get me. She'll take me to the hospital. And I wasn't allowed to leave. I sat in that house for a week after the episode happened before I was allowed to go to the hospital.
He wouldn't even let your mom come get you to take you
And
to
no. And I
kidnap you.
I drove myself to the hospital,
Wow.
a week later.
Wow.
17 staples on the outside and, a million on the inside.
Goodness.
My hardest part for me, I look back on now, is I never should have went back, but I did. It didn't
After that,
stop.
you made a conscious decision to go back into that hell you were living.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And, I didn't, it's one of those that you fear. I mean, he's already done this much. If I don't go back, he's going to do more.
Yeah.
His family knew. I bluntly watched his dad knock him to the ground for putting his hands on me, at 3 a.m. because I had gotten to where I wouldn't call my family, but I would call his dad. And
so his dad actually cared and was trying to line him out.
I have a very close relationship with his dad to this day.
That's great.
I could call him today and say I needed something and he'd make sure I had it.
Wow.
It even went to the point that when it was time for my staples to come out, he took them out with a pair of pliers.
Wow.
So, for me, that led to a lot. And that happened in, I think, heck, I don't remember the month that it was, but it was later into the fall. And, finally his shift had started changing. He was working swing shift. And I called his dad one night and told him, I said, I want to go home. Take me home. And he took me to my mom and dad. And, my mom, she'll question, why didn't you let me come get you? Because I was afraid he'd hurt my mom,
Right.
And, so it was one of those situations that I had enough. And
yeah, man, it took that much. And that's,
it took
that is the power of the human mind. Sometimes is insane because he tried to kill you and you still went back. And it was even after that you finally said, okay.
It was a couple months.
Had enough. Wow.
Yeah, it was a couple months after it happened that I wanted out. My purpose at that point was, I had 3 kids.
Yeah.
At the time I had 3 kids of my own. And, I finally sat down one day and one of his good friends came to talk to me there at the house because, it actually was basically you say it's a girl who cheated on me with. She had no idea about me. And I reached out to her. I'm like, who are you? To this day, her and I are still friends. She came and talked to me and she said, you've got to get out.
Wow.
And, it took somebody that he was close to, other than his dad, somebody he thought he was building this secretive relationship with to help me get out.
Man.
And even when I left and went to my mom and dad's, it was a situation that I couldn't sleep at night. If my mom and dad were asleep, I was awake because I was afraid he was going to come in the window and, things weren't going to go well.
Yeah.
So it took, after that, it took me a little while. My mom and dad tried every way to help me, but I shut myself down.
Yeah.
And from there, I ended up self-admitting myself to what we call here a crisis unit. It's, self, 3 to 5 days you go yourself. I ended up admitting myself there because I was like, okay, something's got to give because I can't live my life in fear. I mean, I lived my life to the point that I didn't want to live anymore.
Yeah.
And certain things would set it off. Even my dad walking in front of me would set it off, and I wouldn't see my dad.
Wow.
I went through the major flashbacks of seeing other people not for who they were.
Wow. Wow.
So it took a whole lot for me.
Yeah. I never, and I'm sure you probably, well, I mean, I don't know if you did before, but I never thought my mind would ever take me to a place where I didn't want to be here anymore. And, going on those calls in the fire department and seeing how the devastation of it and to the families and all that, I was like, man, I can't believe people do that. And why would a man do that and leave these notes for his kids and put that on his kids? And it, always made me angry. And then when that day came, it was like, man, it's a crazy, for people who've never felt it. It's a crazy feeling.
It is.
The thought of, I don't want to be here anymore. And the thought of, that's my next step. And it's, like I said, a true, for me, and I'm sure you, another life warrior moment of this, another change in your life. Like, now I got to do something.
It was, the thoughts would cross my head, but it wasn't an act on basis at that time. It was like, okay, I know I have to get the help I need to get through this, and in all those times, I mean, I had him locked up. They'd let him out.
Yeah.
And even there at the end, he got locked up. He got put on diversion for 2 years. Don't do anything wrong. We're going to let you walk free.
He tried to kill you, attempted murder, and that's what he got.
Mm-hmm. And the reason that they say they didn't even look at it as attempted murder because I couldn't tell them directly what happened to me. Years later, I was able to find out. And I was hit in the back of the head with a Crown Royal bottle.
Wow.
There's another little part to that, but I was hit in the back of the head with a Crown Royal bottle, and I would later found that out from the girl that he was seeing because he would tell her these things. And she did really well by, trying to protect me. She knew that I was going through all the time. So, and all the struggles. So there was things that she didn't want to tell at the time because, it would make it worse. And it was years later when she was able to find that out. So for me, for the longest time, even seeing a Crown Royal apple bottle would throw me completely over the edge.
Yeah.
Just up until about a year and a half ago, one of our gas station people up here, he owns a liquor store too. They're foreign, love them dearly. He would always give us different whiskey bottles, different bourbon bottles, because bourbon is state of Kentucky is bourbon.
Right.
So he would always give us different bourbon bottles. Well, his son was in there one day and he said, "Dad told me to leave you this bottle as a Crown Apple bottle."
Oh, wow.
I passed up my road coming to my house. I wanted nothing to do with that bottle, but I had to bring it home. And what got me over, just one of the small things, what got me over that Crown Apple bottle was I knew how much I liked Crown Apple at the, even throughout
Right.
Nice little sip and drink.
Right.
And like, okay. So I, even my kids now, they saw me hold that bottle and cry. And, they learned to overcome your fears. And that bottle, I knew I was going to overcome it. Yeah. So after about 45 minutes of crying with that bottle, I opened it up and I took a drink and I set it down and I said, I'll never look at that bottle the same again. And that was my way to get past that bottle.
Yeah.
But it was, when you later on find out what did happen, he went on diversion for, a restraining order, abuse, those kind of things, or, domestic violence.
Right.
So at that point, because I couldn't tell a story, I couldn't tell them what happened to me. We live in a very small county, and when you live in a small county like this, it's who you know.
Right.
And, I was okay with it. I was okay with that. I didn't have to worry anymore because I knew that he wasn't going to come after me. And then it spent years of I wouldn't go into town. I would go to the next town over.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go to our county fair because I knew he would be there.
Yeah. So where is he now? What is he still living his life like normal?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Lives maybe 30 minutes from me.
Wow.
Um,
That stuff really, that's the stuff that bothers me about some of these stories, is that there are people, coward, especially men. I've said this before, cowardly men, because they're really not men. But the fact that they get to live their existence every day, and other than his little bit of a punishment,
mm-hmm.
walks free and clear to be able to do the same thing to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Blows my mind.
He, funny story, a little short story about that is we love taking our two little ones to the county fair, truck and tractor pulls.
Yeah.
Little guy loves it dearly.
Yeah.
So the past 2 years we have gone. Last year wasn't so bad, but they knew something was wrong with me because he was out in the arena pulling these tractors, towing these tractors, literally right in front of me. And I was able to explain to, our 13-year-old that sometimes overcoming our fears are overcoming them in the worst ways at the most unexpected times.
Yeah.
So I was able to sit there as much as I wanted to get up and run.
Yeah.
That, I wanted to run. I was able to sit there, finish it out. This year, he was over there waving at us, waving at my mom. And I'm like, dude, I don't have the time of day for you.
Wow. I mean, the arrogance, well, it to me, it truly is a mental illness. There's
Mm-hmm.
like you can just shut all that off and act like it never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
And there are things to this day, that I struggle with. And, a lot of what I went through and a lot of where I am today kind of intertwined and connected itself, because the person who actually brought me home from the hospital was my husband's brother, which I never knew my husband at the time. His brother was one of my very best friends.
Wow.
And, I didn't know him.
Yeah.
I worked for him. One of my things is I'm an outside person. I mowed grass for his brother. He was, hey, girls can't do that. Oh, yes, we can.
Yeah.
So his brother was the one who brought me home when it happened.
Wow.
And, everything just kind of intertwines itself together.
Yeah.
But,
that's how y'all met and started.
We actually met. His brother called me one day and said, hey, I need help. Come help me. I ain't got any people working for me. Okay. I'll come help. I'll come mow some grass for you. Perfect.
Yeah.
It's kind of and it always has been, mowing grass has been kind of in my headspace.
Yeah.
I don't have to, I just get out there and just make my pretty lines and roll on.
Right.
So, yeah, that's, how I met my husband. He was actually going through a divorce and had 2 small kids. And, he wasn't a stay-at-home dad. He was, the dad that got out there and worked, and everything at home was supposed to fall into place.
Right.
And he had no idea. He had no idea how to take care of, a 6-month-old little boy by himself.
Yeah.
So my family, being the family we are, we stepped up, made sure they had clothes, made sure they had, whatever they needed. And they knew me as a friend
Yeah.
before they knew me as, you know, now a mom.
Perfect. Yeah. That's the best way.
It is. It was, but even,
So
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, yeah, go ahead.
Even through life today, I still face the struggles of what happened to me. Certain, like I said, certain sounds, certain, you know, things outside, they still affect me to this day.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine they wouldn't. And it's one of those things that I say now. Um, I realize, and so I'll go through these phases and I realize now I've kind of figured them out. Right, they're like it's a 2 week span. It's all right, and I realize, okay, here they come. This is going to be 2 weeks of this. And I know now, okay, at the end of that second week, I'm gonna be out, be fine, things will be back to normal, and so I've realized that that's just part of my life now,
Mm-hmm.
and so being that it doesn't affect me as bad as it used to, and because you realize that's who you are now.
Mm-hmm.
That was a life warrior, those life warrior moments that affected you and stayed with you and will stay with you for the rest of your days.
They do, and you know, I handle it a lot different now,
Yeah.
um, than I did before.
Yeah.
You know, now, you know, my husband may be out of town working, you know, several nights a week. He hauls heavy equipment, you know, so
Yeah.
there are times that he is, you know, he's out of town.
Yeah.
You know, and used to be I hated to be by myself. You know,
Right.
I've got two kids at home. You know, what's going to come up?
Yep.
You know, so you learn, it's, as I would say in counseling, therapy terms, you learn how to cope. You learn how to deal with those things in a different form.
Yeah.
And for me, I've had to, and it's not that I had to hide those things, it's I had to find different ways to deal with things because of my two younger kids. You know, my husband, he said there's times that something will set me off, and the next morning I wake up and I feel like I have been through the ringer. And he was like, you were fighting somebody. You might have been, he said, you would have the sounds that somebody was choking you.
Wow.
And, you know, so throughout the years that's gotten better. You know, nightmares, I have nightmares, I just don't sleep. I'll be like, oh, nope, it's not time to go back to sleep.
Right.
I've learned, you know, how to deal with things and I guess my own way after I can truthfully say years of therapy. You
Yeah.
know, when I got my PTSD diagnosis, I was like, what's that? You know, I had people tell me, people who are not in the military can't get PTSD. Yes, they can.
Right.
So it became a part for me at that point to become an advocate for people who have PTSD because it's so overlooked.
Yeah. Well, I did, and it's one of those things that I sometimes, and I've talked to some military friends of mine. Of course, my brother was 31 years, and he suffered from it really bad. Um, but one of my military friends told me, he said, I kind of feel like it's not as much, sometimes it's not as much PTSD as it is survivor's guilt. And I never really thought of it never thought about that, you know, um, about survivor's guilt. Now yours is probably different, because you're the survivor. And but in my line of work, it was watching, making those calls, and especially kids, and 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 watching some of my friends not make it out of the fire department, and those kind of things. So it made sense, but I didn't want to admit it. Right? I didn't want to admit I had it, or
No, and
even talk about having it. It's like, I don't want PTSD. I don't no.
right.
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, it wasn't even so much me being diagnosed. This is going to kind of lead me into a little more of the other we talked about. Um, when my husband and I actually started seeing each other, his divorce was final. I had been there to, to help him through his bad situation because it was one of my best friend's brother. And when we found out that his two children, which are my kids, they're mine, when those two children started going through, we started hearing things from them. Things started, not adding up. Here was another thing. It took us 5 years to get those kids full time.
Wow.
So, the 5-year thing hit me hard. But it took us 5 years. And then to see a little boy, I mean, the little girl I shouldn't say her name, but the little girl, when her, when she was diagnosed with PTSD. She went through physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse. She was old enough to understand what was happening and what was going on in her life.
Yeah.
But when I saw a little boy, this is where the PTSD part came in for me. When I saw a little boy at 5 years old diagnosed with chronic PTSD under 6.
Wow.
That struck me right there. I said it wasn't even about, me at that point. It was how do I protect them? Right. So I went from being, a victim in my own life to becoming a protector of a lot of the same things that I went through, those children had went through.
Wow.
And it became a part of what can I do for them? Yeah. How can I help them? Right. And that's when I started really looking at life a lot different. I went through phases in my life where, I wanted somebody to feel sorry for me. Yeah. You go through those phases that, feel sorry for me. But, I looked back and I was like, I'm the one that was stupid for staying. Your mindset changes so much as the years go on. Yeah. But at the point of, understanding my diagnosis and actually having a husband who has PTSD as well, somebody who understood me. Yeah. Somebody who knew my entire story and was there to protect me. That's when, I knew that my life was able to move on, to move forward. Yeah.
No, I get that. Yeah, I feel that, me and Anna are, it is a little bit the same way for me and her. Is, she's been, I didn't know it. I didn't know I needed it, and didn't understand it until, it happened. And then again, like you said, to have somebody that understands what you are and who you are, and that's okay. And they can walk with you in it without judgment or of any kind. That changes things.
Right. It does. When a lot of therapy that I went through, there were a lot of things about myself that I still didn't understand. I would question why did I do this? And, it took me a long time to realize that I can't explain some of the choices I made in my life. Right. But when somebody else will sit down and tell you, that other loved one, that other, like you and Anna, my husband sat down and told me, he said, hey, I get it. I'm not mad at you. I'm not going to, say I'm not going to be with somebody who has these things and went through these things. Yeah. It was actually through me that he understood more of his own PTSD. Yeah. So, our family here is a very PTSD family. Right.
But it works.
It does. And, as much as people say, you don't want to be with somebody who has this, you don't want to be with somebody who, that has went through some of the similar things that you have. Right. But at the same time, when you are with somebody they understand.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that I talk about too is having somebody come in and tell you they understand when they haven't been anywhere near the same road or whatever. That's worse. That was, it's like when my good friend Robert Pointer was murdered, and we had grief counselors come to the fire department and sit down with us. And there was a couple of firemen that were with him because they kind of figured some stuff out like that. But when you have a counselor who's never been a fireman, didn't understand the brotherhood or whatever, try and tell you, hey, I understand completely how you're feeling and what you're going through, and a bunch of firemen sitting around going, oh, that makes me mad. No, you don't. No, you don't. Don't tell me that. So having somebody who actually does. I mean, that's exactly why they brought in firefighters with him, because they knew. They were like, if you go in there and do that, they're going to turn on you real fast. And so, yeah, I get it. It's a perfect mix.
When you talk about that, I was raised in the EMS fire. My mom and dad both were EMTs on different levels, and raised in the police with police officers, all of that. You hear and see a lot, and most people are like, how did they do that? The same reason that I do what I do, but on a different level.
Right. Now, some of it you don't know until it happens. It's like, nobody prepared me for that part of it. I was just a firefighter. I'm gonna go be a firefighter, right? And then, man, then the first call you go on is a 3-month-old SIDS that you're doing CPR on, and you're like, man, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I did not sign up for this.
Right.
And so
you think you were signing to fight fires.
Right. So yeah, I get it. I understand exactly where your parents are, where you're coming from. Like,
so in my situation, my mom and dad thought they knew how to protect me, and to kind of give another little backstory here. My dad, the one I call my dad, is not my biological dad.
Gotcha.
He's been my dad since I was 17, and was more of a dad to me than my own biological father.
Yeah.
And it'll be my dad.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've had all kinds of dips and turns and stuff in your life.
I have, to kind of touch base on, my biological dad. I was 17 when I got pregnant. I was a preacher's daughter.
Yeah. As the story goes, I guess, right?
Exactly. I didn't have a relationship with my biological dad after that until 6 months before he passed away from cancer. Yeah. And, I hate it for him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's all those little life roller coasters that, lead a person to where they are.
Right.
And
Life warrior moments for sure.
Very much life warrior moments. And, we talk about life warrior moments more around here since I met you, through TikTok, we talk about life warrior moments.
Yeah.
I talked to my daughter, my son, he's starting to kind of understand life warrior moments. Yeah. And, I tell him, hey, you're big, you might not feel big. You might be going through all these other crazy things in his life.
Yeah.
But, it's a moment to tell him you made it this far.
Yeah.
Because especially with the little guy, he wasn't old enough. He didn't talk till he came to us. He couldn't talk. So, he never could talk. So his story is more so left unknown.
Yeah. Man, that's,
we do know certain aspects of his story, but not much.
I hate that. It's like, because and I know both that being able to tell it and know it and tell it is what helps a lot of this. And when you can't when you can't tell it, you just in his head knows it, man.
He kind of a thing on him real fast. He's 7,
Yeah,
and we've had them. It'll be 3 years in December that we've had them, and up until 3 years ago, he could not carry on a conversation of complete sentences, anything with you. So he was able to demonstrate and show you things, some things.
yeah,
And that's kind of how we know some of the things, but he suffered more than just things on the outside.
yeah,
He, I'm home all day, except for doing, my different counseling things, different, coaching sessions, different things like that. I had to turn my life around to go from, being in school to working to being a stay-at-home mom with those extra benefits of, being able to do what I do.
yeah,
Both of the kids have just now gone back to public school. They've been here at home for over a year.
yeah,
They were just able to go back to public school, which fingers crossed there that works great for them. But my life, in my eyes of him is you never know what you're going to hear now. He
right,
has learned to try to understand, but he doesn't know how to tell things.
yeah,
And, through my past, through them, through my husband, it was one of my biggest things to say, somebody has to stand up, whether it be standing up for, these kids, standing up for other women who go through this crazy road of life that we think is okay. I can't get
yeah,
out. If I leave, I'm not going to have this. I'm not going to have that. Your life is more precious than all of those things that, and I'm not going to mention names, but we have another one that, through TikTok and through you, through the lives, I've been able to work and help several people, and,
yeah,
you still have those that I can't.
yeah,
You know, it takes a lot of courage to say I can and I'll figure it out.
yeah. No, and that's been the cool thing about this live, especially with you, is and I tell even you're not on there sometimes, and I'll tell people I'm like, I got this lady, I'm telling y'all, and so I'm really blown away by how we've kind of connected with that and have the same mindset. And but just watching you be able to work and some of these people, yeah, I talk to them and I can comfort and go, hey, I give you my opinion, just like we were talking about that mutual friend person we know going through that, where we have kind of the same mindset. You got to get at me, and I'm like, ooh, boy, I'd like to get my hands on that dude, and so you're able to see it from her side because I can't. It's just like I was saying in that video I made earlier about divorce. It's like I'll only speak on what I know from my side, a man's side of divorce. I can't speak on a woman's side of divorce. Just like I can't speak on physical and mental abuse, sexual abuse, because I haven't experienced that. So it's awesome that you're able to kind of intertwine that and get people to speak on it. So here's what I'm thinking, Amanda. I think you got a lot more to tell,
I do have a lot more.
and I think we need to break this into 2 episodes.
That's perfect.
Because I feel like this other part you're fixing to talk about. We talked about a little bit before we came on. I think that's another whole episode important part, which is what we talked about. Where are you now? What has all of that? Where has it gotten you? What are the good things that have come out of it? Where have you gone? What are you doing? Your whole practice and counseling, not to mention the kids. How you feel about that? You up to
That's,
doing a different
yeah,
one?
that's fine.
Um,
Because, I
'Cause-
mean, from where I was, and I won't go into, but from where I was to where I am now is somewhere I didn't think I'd be.
yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is I think that kind of will leave some people in suspense, going, okay, man, they hear this, and now, all right, I want to hear the really really great things that have happened from it. So I think that's perfect. I think we need to do episode number 2, and I'm down for doing it this week anytime you want.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm pretty much free anytime at night because, or of the evening this
Yeah,
time because my little people, they crash out on
yeah,
me.
yeah. So let's do that. Let's figure out a day, and we'll do part 2, and you can tell about the rest of your Life Warrior story. Um, so I appreciate you coming on tonight. I gotta tell you, you know, I never, I always think like even like Mario's story. I never think I'm like I'm gonna be fine. But you know as well as I do, the whole PTSD trigger thing. It's like I make calls on ladies, that experienced it, and man, there are moments where I gotta tell you, and that whole time you probably don't see it. I probably hide it well, but like I am stewing inside, like I'm you know furious, angry, and sad at the same time.
Yes.
And so I appreciate you coming on and telling that part, and I'm excited for people to hear part 2.
Yes.
Uh,
You know, I guess what I could do to even leave more people in more suspense when it comes to part 2 is sometimes people think that their past defines their future.
there you go.
And in ways it does, but in ways it doesn't.
Yeah, I like it. That's a great way to put some suspense on the end of it. So yeah, I think I think, and I honestly think there's going to be more than just these 2 podcasts.
Probably.
I think we're gonna end up maybe teaming up with some people. Hopefully, we can get some other people on, and we can both give our feedback and stuff like that. I think that'd
Yeah,
be
I'd be
so.
open to that.
All right, y'all. Well, that was a great beginning of Amanda's story. Only the beginning. The best parts are yet to come. What she's doing now, and I appreciate everybody coming on. Y'all go subscribe and like and all the good things so we can start getting this message out together. This Life Warrior message, and yeah.
And
So we'll do.
and
What's
don't
that?
forget, people, you can share the podcast.
Ray? Yes, you can share the podcast. So please do that as much as you can. The more people we reach out to, the better this thing gets. So, all right, Amanda, thanks. And go do your Life Warrior stuff again tomorrow, girl, and we'll figure it out.
Day.
All right.
See ya.